And TikTok is here to stay. The popular social media app says it's completed a deal to spin off its U.S. operations, ending a years-long battle over Chinese spying concerns. The company says the new U.S. joint venture will operate under defined safeguards that protect data security. Now President Trump is celebrating the deal, saying the app will now be owned by a group of great American patriots and investors. Let's bring in ABC's Elizabeth Schulze and foreign correspondent Britt Clennett in Hong Kong. Hi to you both. So Elizabeth, how is this deal going to work and what does it mean for TikTok users?
And Diane, this is really the end of a drama that you and I have been talking about for years, this battle over a ban on TikTok. What it means is that TikTok will be available for the more than 200 million users in the U.S., 7 million businesses, both big and small, that rely on this app. How this works is that TikTok will now be owned by a group of investors, mostly based out of China. So those investors include an investment firm based in the UAE, a private equity firm called Silver Lake, Michael Dell's family office, and then Oracle, which will be basically in charge of storing and protecting TikTok's data and its algorithm. So how this, this all stems from that 2014 law that was passed by Congress that said that TikTok needed to cut its ties with its Chinese parent company or risk a ban in the U.S. That law was passed with broad bipartisan support. It was upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court. Remember, when that ban was taking effect, we saw that brief 14-hour period where TikTok actually did black out in the U.S., and then President Trump kind of delayed the enforcement of the ban several times until this deal was finally reached. So the bottom line is this means that TikTok will be able to continue operating in the U.S., at least for now.
And Britt, this started with Congress banning TikTok over concerns that China could access American users' data. Does this eliminate those concerns entirely?
Well, I think that's a big question. 200 million Americans use this platform, and it concludes a years-long effort to ease concerns that it posed a national security risk. Well, for TikTok, it says it will operate under defined safeguards that protect national security through data protections, algorithm security, content moderation, and software assurances for those 200 million American users. And yes, the transfer of user data, it does help ease some worries because that data will now be housed with U.S. servers under the American entity that includes Oracle. However, the algorithm is licensed to the U.S. to be retrained in the U.S., but the source code for the algorithm is still owned by China. So potentially it could still be manipulated. Now, those are some of the big questions that remain surrounding this deal. And as I say, 200 million users probably with similar questions. And as Elizabeth was saying, this has been quite a drama, quite an ordeal. And to finally see this concluded, certainly a relief from those TikTok users.
And Britt, how's China reacting to this?
Yeah, so we heard from the Chinese Foreign Ministry today saying that their position has been consistent. It didn't directly address the question asked in the Foreign Ministry, but, it reiterated its line that their reaction throughout this whole thing has been muted to very much keep some distance between ByteDance and the parent company, ByteDance, the parent company, and the Chinese government, playing it off as this private transaction throughout this whole ordeal. But it has officially thrown its support behind ByteDance, officially, it must be said, Diane.
Elizabeth, what are you watching for as this deal takes effect?
Well, so as Britt mentioned, the algorithm ultimately is still kind of what is happening as part of this is the U.S. is basically leasing the algorithm. And this release that TikTok put out, it says it will retrain the algorithm. So one question we have is, will that actually change the experience at all for people who use TikTok? We know that the algorithm is basically the crown jewel, the secret sauce of why people stay on the app, use it so much. So that's a question going forward. Probably not something people would notice immediately. If you go on the app today, it's unlikely you would see any major changes there. The other thing to keep watching is, ultimately, does this kind of reinforce, do we continue to see these concerns about Chinese-owned apps going forward? This has been such a pawn, Diane, kind of in this broader trade conversation between the U.S. and China. It seems that there's been an agreement now. President Trump overnight did put out a post praising President Xi for basically giving his blessing to this deal, but it doesn't change the fact that there are still those very underlying trade tensions between the U.S. and China. Just one note is that this does apply to some other ByteDance-owned apps that are really popular for people who use TikTok for editing, so like CapCut, Lemonade, those are also included as part of this deal, Diane.
Elizabeth Schulze, Britt Clennett, thank you.